When I got back to the game, I was getting very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monsters looked at me. The game couldn't have heard what I said. That's impossible. It had to be a random occurrence, but why did it happen precisely at the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement monsters, out of place imagery, like the Green Temple quizzes levels and the red monster chases, it didn't seem to add up any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it wasn't a very funny way. I could understand and that they clearly put far too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genie sequel to the new Godzilla monsters, then why did they do everything else? Maybe it was some kind of art experiment? Some group project made a bunch of really talented and crazy people, and they did lost cartridge somehow? Or maybe they intended for some random person to find it? It was all just fruitless guessing. As far as I could tell, there was only one way to figure out the whole deal with this game, is to play it through until the end. Maybe, just maybe, there would be something in the credits. An explanation by the creators as to why they made this? Or could it be something much more cryptic and strange? Maybe even something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the Demetria board, I considered replaying the trance to see if the red monster would look at me again. But I decided against it. I wanted to keep moving forward. I was also somewhat worried about the backtracking might cause the game to become even more strange. The Dementa board music sounded a lot like the Saturn music, except it was slowed down and played with a piano sounding like instrument. Like most of these new map themes, it had a dangerous, suspenseful feel. While listening to the music, I looked at the Dementa board, and there were 4 boss monsters this time: Space Godzilla, Manda, Gigan, and Baragon. I was surprised that there were 2 new Toho monsters in this time, but the best surprise was still to come. I started the quiz level. Here's another results on the same format as the last one. Can you swim? Answer, yes. Do you like fish? Answer, yes. Can penguins fly? Answer, no. Can it spin in all directions? Answer, no. Do you breathe oxygen? Answer, yes. Does it taste good when you bite a woman? Answer, no. Is it night where you are? Answer, yes. Do you like cats? Answer, yes. Is the water wet? Answer, yes. Have you ever broken a bone? Answer, no. Do you like your job? Answer, yes. Would you like a new monster? Answer, yes. I wasn't entirely sure at the time what the face meant by new monster, but I couldn't resist any answering yes, just to see what would happen. The result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board, and I had a new playable monster in the form of the Anguizar. Ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to play as Anguirus, since he was my second Godzilla monster, and plus I never really liked Mothra that much. I moved my new Anguirus piece over to the right level right next to it, eager to test out my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk to you guys about Anguirus a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose whatever Anguirus stood in a bipedal stance or crawled around in all fours. It wasn't a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles and attacks. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but no tail whip. Instead, he had something far more interesting. the ability to curl up into a spiked ball of death and roll around. You could still take damage, but it was lessened, and it was a good way of clearing out stage enemies. But unfortunately, doing this will drain your power bar. But the spiked ball wasn't his only special ability. When you press start, he would often fire a beam of energy from his mouth. It resembled the Titanosaurus sonar attack, and if it was a hack, it may have been inspired by the roar attack from the Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also note that while playing as the Angros, the level meter has glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I'd say he's on level 10. Now on to the level. As you may have guessed from the level icon, these levels are green palette swaps from the ground and background tiles from the blue mountains, but what immediately caught my attention was the water, which has a transparency effect. Was even it possible for a NES game? I know the Super Nintendo could do it, but I've never seen a transparency effect on the game on the NES. The Green Mountains music was playing the same, with the instrument as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was totally different. It was a completely very simple song with a lot of abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note of every few seconds. Anyway, I went through the usual scrolling through the level, and again, there was no monsters or anything, but pretty soon, I had reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere to go but in the water, so down I went. The water transparency made things a bit harder to see, but it was tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered 2 new enemies, a giant piranha and some kind of spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha because I could easily tell what it was. It was the same enemy design that would appear in the real game, and there were very few enemies like this. They didn't take as much hits to kill, but they were quite annoying and could considerably trim down your life if they got close enough. They also had to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeders, they're easy to deal with. They swim along the bottom of the screen towards you, and they're easily crushed with the roll attack or just a jump over. In this screen cap, you could tell me what you run over to one of them, and here's a pack of piranha behind it. After that I beat the level, I moved Godzilla over to the blue icon. Soon, I started the level and got to the title screen with the text, "Unforgiving Cold." The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made out of blue bricks, with rows of identical white statue faces on the walls. These statue faces have a permanent look of horror on their faces. There was also some flickering gray static, which it didn't really obscure my vision, but it adds on to every unsettling mood of these levels. The music was 12-second loop of low-pitched choir vocalizing. It sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these levels, I've all got a sudden horrible feeling of anxiety. I had the feeling that the farther I progressed through the level, the closer I was getting to something unspeakably evil. There wasn't any enemies, but there were a lot of the longest levels in the game. I only played one level, but it took only 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit this to myself at the time, but I realized that something playing the Blue Castle level, this game has power to make the player feel certain things. I didn't mean in the sense that you'll get irritated playing a crappy game or get unnerved by something scary in the game. What I meant is that certain levels and events in this game can instantly make you start feeling something. I know that sounds completely insane, but I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe in any of this either if I didn't play the game myself. But there's something very wrong with this game, and I still didn't know how to explain it. So then it was time to fight the Baragon's replacement. Although Baragon was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. It was so tall, in fact, that the ground was noticeably lowered. Not Baragon's head was barely avoided collision with the bar at the top of the screen, and he was just as frighteningly bizarre as he was huge. You may be wondering how he attacks without arms. Well, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his fighting technique is much stranger. At first, he blasts a cloud of breath and pixels down at you, which causes you to freeze. Then he walks back to the corner of the screen and extends the huge Gatling gun from his abdomen. That might be amusing to you, but it certainly wasn't to me when I was playing the game. This attack almost as annoying as the Gigan saw. Not the Baragon would have been unbeatable if he consistently used it. Thankfully, he only used it twice while fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me to destroy him, and then it was time for me to play the third level type. I decided that I was going to use Angoras to fight Manda and Gigan, and then fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before getting to the battles, I'll describe the third level type, the Arctic. The Arctic was exactly you guessed from the level, icy tundra with a few watery segments. But the music reminded me a bit of the Northern Hemispheres from Donkey Kong Country, in 8-bit form. A very dangerous sounding song, as it makes you think about being trapped in the tundra and freezing to death. You were told by new enemies at this stage that the first creature was frozen in a block of ice. They block your way and you have to beat them down with your beam to fall them out of the ice. They look a bit smaller version, not Gerzora, but without the eye. When it freed, it would do a very strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't cause you any damage, but it was a bit annoying. After dealing with the Icemen, I kept walking for a minute or two and came up on the water segment. I jumped in, and this time, I managed to get a screen cap of showing him the water splashes when you jump in. Don't know if they programmed it that way, but it's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is that how the screen changes and focuses when you go underwater. Here you could see a new enemy, a little thing called Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly, or instantly if you attack them, sending spikes in every direction. The spikes don't do damage, but they'll most likely get me dangerously close to falling into a pit a few times. Oh, and speaking of pits, going down the water, the game has a platformer element, Bottomless Pits. There weren't any of these in the original game, since it was strictly an action game, but the pits were a neat addition. After getting back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Magoma, the Walrus Kaiju. I know this game had some obscure monsters to begin with, but now that I'm not complaining, it's pretty cool cameo for an unappreciated Kaiju. Magoma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam, and he could charge at you. Not very challenging, but certainly a lot more entertaining than the Matego mini-boss in the original game. One thing is really interesting about Magoma is the fact that he doesn't die when you defeat him. He turns tail and retreats. This is the first time I had ever seen an enemy monster change in that direction, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but he disappeared after I got in the water. Poor bastard. And what he does next in the Arctic, I'll talk to you more about the Manta fight next. I forgot to mention before, but the music played along during the new monster fights were reused from the themes from the actually in the games. So far it had been Jizora's music in Titanosaurus, Bolionet Hedorah's music, Orga, Baragon, and Murgua's music, Manda, Varian's music, Space Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla's music. As for the fight, Manda was clearly crafty opponent. When I realized its tactics were ineffective, it would immediately change to a different one. Manda used quite a few tricks, like spitting fire, biting, and most irritating of all, constricting. He does it mercilessly to try to drain your life down, like Gilligan's cutter, but it was only by Manda's strongest attack. One thing to note that I found pretty cool was the Ultragon showed up during the fight to help me out. Manda crushed it with ease, but it was still cool. After I slayed Manda, I played for the Arctic level for health power-ups, and it was just on Gilligan's replacement. When the fight started, I was very confused, because there was nothing here, although I was going to be like the Titanosaurus fight in Paphos. But just about the time it would have been going back to the map, a piranha appeared on screen. But it wasn't there for long. As soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech, and not the Gilligan flew and ripped the poor fish into pieces. Well, that's one way to get the player on their toes, but abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me. It got my adrenaline rushing. In retrospect, was a good thing, because not Gilligan was one of the fastest, most unrelenting opponents in the game. Not Gilligan was tough, but my new skills with Anguirus helped me out throughout the score. This was still an incredibly tense fight. Not Gilligan's attacks consist of some kind of blood laser spews from his mouth and downward slash. I was expecting some hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was invulnerable by defeating him, and I would have taken care more of the screen caps of fright, but I really had to concentrate. After that, there was just one monster left to take down, Space Godzilla, as mentioned earlier. I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but immediately a very clear idea. Space Godzilla would use his energy to create two flying crystals, which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires will not only block you from reaching Space Godzilla, but it will also allow him to consistently recharge in full energy and blast you with a deadly, fully charged Corona Beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla would eventually drain his own spires with energy until they're shattered. But if you waited for what happened, you'd probably lose a lot of life. Heat beams are actually seem to be re-energized the spires, so you had to use your physical attacks. When you finally get close enough to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, he hits me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the left corner of the screen so he can create more spires. By the time this was over, I had a lot about 5 life bars left. But it didn't matter because I didn't need to fight anymore. I needed to run. Here we go again. I decided right then and there I wanted to see the end of this game. Terrifying as the levels could sometimes be, I had to beat them and get them through. I decided that no matter what happened, no matter what the game showed me, I was going to get to the end, and I also made sure not to say any damned word heard while playing the chase level from here on. For this chase, I had tried out Angus, and he seemed to pull his roll attack, allowed me to move faster than Godzilla or Mothra. The chase started off like the first two, except there was a river of blood below the ground. I was beginning to get the hang of it, and the extra speed from the roll actually helped me get on edge with the red monster, especially since I didn't have to worry about a power limit, and would just keep rolling endlessly. Like in the previous levels with water, the ground inevitably reached to a stop, and it rolled off into the blood. No surprise there, the hell beast didn't even follow me. It just stopped at the edge of the ground and grimaced. I guess it can't swim, I thought to myself. So I went under blood and I continued moving. There wasn't anything around, but I knew something was up. The chase wasn't going to seem to end easily. Could it? Surely something else had to show up, and sure enough, I heard the blowing roar, sounding slightly different. and the monster was following me in a new aquatic body. I had no idea it was a shapeshifter. After it appeared, the chase started to get into difficulty than I expected. Being submerged slowed me down and putting me in the beast at least about the same speed. The only thing I could keep alive was like thinking facts, fast, and reflexes. I encountered some bottomless pits in which I floated them back up to the top. I assumed that if you hit one, it would damage you and knock you back. Considering how fast the red monster swims, hitting the mines would also be instant death. So if I went through with great effort to avoid them. But with that, it wasn't all that I had to be wary of about. Halfway through the chase, the hell beast revealed yet another surprise. A tentacle-formed intestine that tipped of the clawed set of jaws burst from its mouth, trying to pull me and devour me. I barely avoided its tentacle and the mines, but I could tell the beast was getting desperate, and because this chase was nearly over. And about a minute later, I had spotted a bit off the ground and served up a bit towards the exit. I leaped with all my might I could muster, without breaking my controller. The beast screamed with rage and jumped out of the blood river in one attempt to drag me down, but I escaped its grasp this time. I fell back into my bed and took a deep breath, satisfied with yet another successful escape. Now I was headed up to the 5th level, Entropy.